there, welcome to my channel. My name is Linda. Join me today as we kick off our 2025 DIY season of celebrating America's independence by taking a look back at some of my favorite July 4th crafts from last year, plus 2 new crafts that you have not seen before. Let's get this started with project number 1. This is a spindle from a little corner shelf. I took all the spindles off, threw the little shelves away. There wasn't much to do with those. And I'm marking them down to 6 inches each. I want 2 of them. I'll go ahead and cut the spindles off camera. And for my stars, I'm just using these metal stars from Dollar Tree. They come in a 2-pack, red, white, and blue, like one of each, whatever color it is. And then I'm coming in on my little spindle pieces, and I'm just painting it like really thick and globby, whatever you want to call it, heat drying it in between, so that way when I distress these off camera, big chunks will kind of come off, but you can, distress or not distress how you want it. Now I'm coming in and I'm going to paint over the white stars because the white doesn't match. I wanted a cream color. And then that way, of course, when I go to distress these and sand them, that little bit of white will show through, and that's okay. So here are the spindles. They're cut. I distressed them. They look great. Now for this part of the project, I will have a free pattern available for you. As a matter of fact, for any projects today that require a pattern or a printable or something like that, they will be listed in my description box by project number so that you can go to that blog link, okay? So for this project, this bell, you need to cut 2 of whatever fabrics you're going to use for each bell, okay? So my first one I'm going to do off camera. It's kind of this burgundy polka dot fabric that I got at jubileefabrics.com. I'm going to cut 2 of those, just like I said. And then for my second bell, I have these jeans I found at a thrift store. I loved the color of the blue, so I'm going to cut bell from these jean materials, but I also like it because I think it gives it a great kind of country charm look using jean material. I am also going to elect to use a batting for each of my bells. You do not have to, it is optional. For each bell you make, you're going to need the spindle like we painted in the last and a metal star. Here are my 2 jean pieces already cut out, so of course you'll need 2 of those. I just love how this gives it a country farmhouse look. And then of course I have my 2 pieces of optional batting for my bell. Also, I'm going to be using this fusible interfacing. It's medium weight heat and bond fusible interfacing because I want to use my crocodile and these wide eyelets at the top of my bell. This can be found at Walmart. I believe Dollar Tree has some as well. I just cut 2 small squares. We're going to get this on first. There's a rough dotted side and a smooth side. The rough dotted side goes down in the fabric, onto the fabric, and I'm just going to place it at the top of our bell and iron it on. It takes like 10 seconds for each bell to iron on. Then your batting's going to go down here. All right, 1 on each side of your bell. And then in the end, it's going to go together like this. And I'm going to sew around the bell, leaving an opening, 2-3 finger opening to stuff. If you're a gluer and you want to use batting, you'll glue all your batting on, all right? Both pieces separately. Place it together, and then you're going to go around the edge, whether or not you use batting, between the 2 fabrics all the way around, again, leaving an opening for stuffing. All right, so here I am going to go ahead and sew my bell all the way around. The reason I like to use the batting is because it makes it look like you just cut apart a quilt, and it just kind of gives it that country look. That's why I always say when I go to use batting on projects like this, it's optional. It really is optional. Okay, you don't have to have that country look, but I just love the look of that batting poking out. For all you sewers out there, I'm coming in just about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here. I'm coming around to the bottom of the bell, and I'm leaving that little, it's probably about 3-4 inch opening. Here's my sewing and my opening. Before we stuff, I want to add my eyelet. I'm using my crocodile tool here. I'm punching a hole. Now with the added optional use of the interfacing, when I punch the hole, it gives me this nice crisp hole. If you don't use the interfacing, it gives you kind of a tattered sort of hole, but you still get a hole there. But if you don't have eyelets or anything like that, then don't bother with the interfacing, but still you need some kind of hole there to make this project work with adding the star and our little spindle on top or whatever. All right, so I punched my hole and then used the same crocodile tool to very easily add the eyelet. And now I'm going to go ahead and start stuffing my bell here. And then of course, stuff it as full as you want it. Once you have that complete, those of you that are gluers, of course, you're going to glue your opening closed and sewers sew your opening closed. Here's what my bell looks like. Everything is put together so super cute. And now I'm going to take my metal star. I haven't distressed it yet. I'm just using like 220 grit sandpaper on my little finger sander thing here. I got it like Ace Hardware. And I love how the white kind of pops up. And then I'm just trying to get areas where the metal will pop up as well, just to distress it out a little bit. Our spindle here, again, 6 inches. If you don't have that, you could use dowels from Dollar Tree. Cut those to the length you want. Or I would prefer using the toilet bowl plunger handle because it's a thicker wood. And I would probably use the curly cued end because it just gives it a little personality. Either one would work, or stick from the backyard. Now I've got some really thick diameter twine here I get at Walmart, and it's a big long, probably 3 feet long twine. I don't need that much. I just always cut a big long piece, and I'm threading it through our little eyelet area here, getting my star up to the opening, and then I'm going to wrap, and you could glue this on, but I didn't feel a need to, but I'm going to wrap my twine around the spindle here. And what I mean is you could glue the twine onto the spindle so you know that it stays. Wrap it around how you like it, and then I'm just making a nice big bow, and then I will cut my tails off as long as I want them to be. And then you could add beads down here if you want as well, but I chose not to. I'm just going to tie a little knot at the end and smush out the little pieces after the knot. That makes this Liberty Bell complete. Here's a look at both of them together, the one I made off camera. I think they turned out so super cute. Let's move on into project number 2. For this project today, I'm bringing in this placemat from Dollar Tree because it's the right size, but some of you may also want to use it as part of your base. We're making placemats, did I tell you that? This size is 12 by 18. If you want to use part of this placemat as your base, you can use the back side and then just glue or sew the rest of your materials right on top. It'll save you a little bit of fabric. I'm not going to use it as my base. I'm going to elect to cut 2 pieces of this fabric I get at Walmart. This is Waverly brand, 100% cotton fabric. It's kind of thick like a duck cloth. 2 pieces at 12 by 18. And then for the right side of, our stripes on our flag, I'm going to use these 3 fabrics. You can use as many fabrics as you want. The top and bottom came from Walmart and the middle one came from Joann's. I'm going to use another piece of the duck cloth fabric for our star area. I'll give you dimensions of these top fabrics in a minute. And this blue piece of fabric for our star area as well that came from Joann's. All right, and some optional batting because, as you all know, I like to look at I like it to look like, let's get my words together, like I just cut up a quilt and made this placemat. All right, bottom pieces again. I'm using 2 12 by 18. If you want to use a placemat for your bottom, you just need 1 piece for your top portion. Okay, then for the stripes, cut 3. These are 4 inches in width. I'm going to lay them down here, just so you can see it, 4 inches in width, 17 inches in length because I want them a little shorter than the overall base of our main fabric of our placemat. For the star area, I'm again bringing up that fabric that I used the base of our placemat. It's 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches, and then I'm going to add blue fabric that is 5 by 5. The batting here, so you can use batting wherever you want on this. I cut 1 piece for the base of the placemat, so it is the 12 by 18 inch size, okay? I'm going to use another piece of batting that's going to be underneath our stripe area. Now this is 11.25 inches by 17 inches. So 11.25 inches tall by 17 inches because I'm going to overlap our stripe material. And then I've cut another square piece of batting for under our star area under the blue fabric. So that's going to be 5 by 5. Now I want to distress my fabric. You don't have to, and instead of sitting there pulling on the little strings to fray the edges, I'm just using this 220 grit sandpaper and I'm just sanding along the edges. And as you see, I can do a couple of pieces of fabric at one time, and it's going to help kind of break up those ends and fray and allow the threads to pop out around our pieces of material. Again, this is optional. You don't have to have that. And then once we glue or sew all of this together, when you wash your placemat and stuff, more of this is going to, fray out and everything, and going to look even more kind of rustic country farmhouse. So as we get started here, we're working with our top piece of fabric for our placemat only, not the bottom piece, okay? And then we're going to work with the batting, if you use batting, that fits our striped area. So that 11¼ by 17-inch piece of batting. And we're just going to lay our material how we want to lay it on here. You can use many materials as you want here. If you want just one piece of red and white stripe, skip this part. But I wanted some different fabrics to make it fun. And I'm going to overlap it, and it's going to be about a 1/2 inch overlap. Okay, the center fabric's going to come under that top fabric and then over the bottom fabric. That's just how I'm choosing to overlap it. You can do however you want. Once this part is done, gluers, you can just glue this whole ensemble together. Sewers, we need to sew on our individual stripes, and I want to sew those on and then sew around the perimeter. I'm going to explain to you here how I did it in like one sewing swoop. Okay, what I'm going to do is start in the center, and I'm going to sew that kind of rectangular pattern around that centerpiece, and then continue up around the edge, and you get it all in one swoop like I just said. Hopefully that's understandable. So when you start sewing, I'll show you here, you start on the long side of that center stripe, and by sewing the center stripe in, of course, it will sew in your top and bottom stripe as well. Then you sew your short side, come down the other long side, and then as you sew your last short side, you just continue up and around the outer perimeter of your fabric. Now, when you get to one side of this, you're going to see here, it's already sewn, so this is where you're going to kind of overlap. But again, like I said, it looks totally fine, and continue on around until you finish up this whole thing. So hopefully you like this and you don't have to lift your foot up and down 20 million times, and you get it all in one swoop. I think I now like that word. All right, this is what it looks like when it's done. I'll turn this over so you can see the pattern, because I know it's hard to see with all those designs. This is what that looks like. See, all in one, say it with me, swoop. Now we want to work on our star area. So we're bringing in our same fabric we used for the placemat, our batting, and our blue star material. If you're a gluer, you're going to glue all that together and then glue this onto the left side of your placemat. Sewers, I'm going to sew off camera this first part, which is the blue to that, cotton fabric. And then I'm going to sew that whole ensemble onto the top portion of the placemat only. We still haven't attached our bottom portion yet, okay? As I'm sewing this together, I'm kind of sewing the star portion a little bit askew on my flag here. I don't want it to be nice and straight and look all perfect, which is kind of weird for me. But no, when I'm doing these kind of country rustic farmhouse crafts, I want it to have a little bit of personality. So as you can see and look there on the left side, it's a little bit askew. Now we assemble our whole placemat. So if you're using a Dollar Tree placemat, whether or not you use batting, glue or sew this whole ensemble to that placemat backing, or if you're using separate fabric like I am with your batting, glue or sew this whole ensemble together. If you're sewing it, I just sew around that outer edge. I'm flipping it over here so you can see what that looks like to get everything together in one unit. Now I want to add a little bit of fun to that star area. This is a free printable. It'll be in that blog link in my description box. And this is something I printed onto fabric using my inkjet printer. It does work on a laser printer as well, but when you print it out, it might come out a little bit lighter. This tag is about a 3x4 inch size. I want to sandwich it all together with that same quilted look, so I do cut an additional piece of batting 3x4 and a backing piece of fabric as well. Now, if you've never printed on LaserJet or inkjet printer onto fabric, there'll be a video link in the blog post to show you how to do that if you need to check that out. So if you're a gluer, glue it all together. If you're a sewer, I sewed around it. I did it twice to make it kind of fun and wonky, and this is what that looks like. And then I'm going to take some Distress Oxide ink and Vintage Photo in my little ink dauber, and I'm just going to go around the wording a little bit and the stars to kind of highlight that design. Now I'm going to use a little safety pin here, and I'm going to safety pin this portion to that blue star area. When you print onto fabric like this, I haven't found a way to seal it. So if you were to throw this part through a washer, it would just all wash out. So by just pinning this part separate, you can remove it when you need to wash your whole placemat. Also, I kind of like how it looks just pinned anyway, because it just gives it, again, some fun personality. Now, if you have an electronic cutting machine, you could, of course, elect to use heat transfer vinyl and then just heat transfer vinyl it onto this, and then you could wash the whole thing, not pin it. You could sew it to it or glue it to it or whatever you want, and then just wash the whole thing in its entirety. Once that's pinned on, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 placemats done. You can make as many as you need, but I think these turned out fabulous. And that makes this project complete. Let's step into project number 3 with an Americana dupe. Let's take a look at our inspirational photo. This is a 2-tone Americana mini pillow coming in at a size of 6 by 6, one pillow at $24. Let's see if we can do better than that. So for this project, these are the 2 fabrics I'll be using. The one on the right is from Walmart. The one on the left is from Joann's. I just freehanded a heart pattern, fold a piece of paper in half, draw half of it, cut it out, and when you open it up, ta-da! You have a full heart. So whatever size you want, but my heart came in at a 9 by 9 size. Theirs was a 6 by 6 if you remember. So when you cut your fabric out, you're actually cutting out a half of a heart on each fabric, and you want 2 for each color. Now when I cut this out, I'm actually going to increase my width down the center of my heart about a 1/2 inch. You don't have to, but if you don't do that, when you go to attach your hearts together, your heart is probably going to be about a 1/2 inch smaller than the 9 by 9 size. Not a big deal. Okay, so I'm cutting my 2 fabrics out for each color of heart, half heart. Does that make sense? And see how I'm just about a 1/2 inch bigger down that center, 1/2 inch wider, I should say, down that center. That way, when I go to attach my right sides together of each heart, when I go to sew or glue down that center line strip, I've got a 1/2 inch here of fabric. And then that way, when I open it up, I've got a 9 by 9 size. Does that make sense? All right, so you glue or sew down each side. I've sewn off camera, and now I'm just going to iron down my seam so it's nice and flat here. And then I open it up. I've got 2 9-inch hearts. If you didn't, like I said, do that, add that extra little 1/2 inch width, your heart will just maybe be like 8.5 inches wide. Not a big deal. All right, now I've decided I want to add a little batting to my heart pieces. I'm going to cut 2 out the size of my heart because I want this pillow to look like I just simply cut the fabric from an already made quilt and sewed it together. If you use batting, and you're a gluer, you want to go ahead and glue your batting to each side of your heart. If you're a sewer, just lay your batting on each side of your heart. Put your hearts together. Okay, everything together. If you're a gluer, you're going to glue between the 2 pieces, batting or no batting, all the way around your outer perimeter of that heart and leave a little opening here for stuffing. If you're a sewer, you're going to sew all the way around, leaving that opening for stuffing. I'm going to do that off camera. Here is my heart, trying to find where I left the opening there on the right side. For stuffing, it's already sewn, ready to go. Now what I want to do is I'm just ripping some muslin material, adding a piece of batting to the center because I want to make a cute little tag for the heart. They had a cute little tag that said USA, right? So if you don't want to use batting in the center, you just need 1 piece of ripped fabric, but I, of course, want to use batting. So if you do that, you glue it all together or sew it together like I did here off camera. And of course, we're going to lindify all our dupes, so I'm going to add in some rusty wire here and a rusty star, and then just a little bulb. They call them bulb, B-U-L-B, like light bulb safety pin. I'm going to bring in my clickable stamps here. I believe there said USA. I'm going to spell out the word freedom with some VersaFine ink here. and I'm going to stamp that word freedom in the center of my tag. I will have links to the Rusty Wire, the star, and the clickable stamps in my description box. Now I'm using Distress Oxide Ink Vintage Photo, and I'm just adding a little bit of distressing around the word to give it a little bit of halo, leaving the center clean without any ink so that that freedom word kind of pops out, right? And now I'm just taking that rusty wire and I'm curling it around a paintbrush handle, give it some curly cues, and then I made just a little loop in the center there so we can actually loop it onto our safety pin. And then what you need to do next, all that set aside, ready to go ahead and stuff your heart and either glue or sew it closed when it's done. Here's mine ready to go. Now, since I distressed my tag, my heart fabric looks a little bit too clean. So I'm just coming in with that same Distress Oxide Ink and Vintage Photo, and I'm just kind of dirtying up my little heart pillow just a little bit. Take the whiteness out of the stars, grungy them up just a little bit. I do that front and back. You can do that as much as you want or not at all. Now I'm going to take a little crochet trim. I'm just going to make a simple bow by tying a little knot in the center, cut off the amount I want. That bow is done. And then I'm going to start layering all my pieces together here. So I'm going to take my safety pin, add the star, add our little bow, if you want to call it that, add the little wire on the back through the little loop we made, and then through the tag, and then I'm just going to pin it to the pillow. Real simple. It was quick and easy to make. I think it turned out super cute and had a little bit more something than the one from Antique Farmhouse. Let's take a look at the comparison. So their 6x6 pillow came in at $24. Our 9x9 pillow came in at $1.50 with a savings of $22.50. What do you think? Let's move forward with another Americana dupe, project number 4. For this dupe, this is a set of 3 flag pillows. They're mini flag pillows. They were like 3.5 by 5. I'm just going to make one, but the price at the end will reflect it if I would have made 3. Our flag pillow is going to be a 5 by 8 size, so twice the size. I'm using this fabric from Joann's and this fabric from Walmart. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to rip some 1-inch strips for the flag or the stripe portion on our flag. So I'm going to rip the length and the width, or the length that I need. The width is 1 inch. Rip 3 of them, and then I'm only going to do 3 stripes, and then the stripe on the top, I'll just rip it a little bit shorter to make room for the star area on the left-hand side. And I'm just ripping everything so nothing has to be straight or neat. Plus, it gives it kind of that, fun, rustic kind of farmhouse look. All right, so I've got my star ripped. It's about a 2 by 3 size, and now I'm just ripping 2 pieces of that muslin material and using a piece of batting in the center, just like we did on the heart pillow. So if you don't want like a padded tag, because they have a tag on their little flag pillows, then of course you just need 1 piece of fabric ripped. But if you want to sandwich it like I'm doing, 2 pieces of fabric and then a piece of batting in the center. And then once that's all cut and or ripped, I'm now cutting 2 pieces of batting for the center of our flag. Now I'm placing my flags, the stripes, in the way I want them to be. If you're a gluer, you can glue those on and then glue your star fabric in the upper left portion area of your flag. I'm going to sew all of those on, of course, off camera, and then I'm going to sew my tag together. Of course, if you're a gluer, you glue your tag together. So here's what my flag looks like all sewn. You can't see around the stripes, but I went all the way around the perimeter of the stripes. And now we're going to assemble our pieces together. So if you're a gluer and you added batting, you want to glue your batting pieces to each side, your front and back of your flag separately, and then put your flag together. And then in between the layers, you want to glue around the perimeter and glue your flag closed, but leave an opening for stuffing. Of course, here mine is sewed. I did a double stitching around it because I double stitched around the star portion and the tag, and I wanted it to kind of, all look like it went together. Here's my opening for stuffing. I'm going to go ahead and stuff all that, and then once you do that, you sew or glue your opening closed. My flag's all stuffed. It's cute. Now I'm going to come in just like on the heart pillow. It's the same routine here. I'm, inking around the little tag here. I'm going to ink on the pillow as well, kind of grungy up those white areas, a little bit in the star area. Don't forget the back side. You all know I like to finish off the back, and we'll just lindify it up a little bit. You're going to be amazed, even with the added extra little touches and added extra little pieces that we add to our flag, it still comes in insanely inexpensive. I'm using the clickable stamps again. I'm spelling this time the word Liberty, stamping it onto the tag here. All right, I'm going to again use a little piece of crochet trim with a knot tied in the center, a little red bell. You can see it laying over to the right. And I have about a 1-inch strip of muslin material I just kind of decided how long I wanted it to be. It's probably about 8 inches long. And I'm taking those clickable stamps with the word USA, and I'm just spacing it out and stamping it along that strip USA all the way down. All right, and then I'm just inking around the edges so it matches the rest of my inking on the rest of the project. Let me say that again. And then I'm just going to tie a little knot in the center so it matches the little crochet bow with a knot in the center, if you want to call it a bow. Making sure that my USA is upright, twisting it if I need to. And then I'm layering everything together so that you can see the USA on there. So I'm going to put my bell on first, then through the crochet tag. The crochet bow, it's kind of downward, and the USA is upward, so you kind of see them both, and then pinning it to that tag. And then I'm going to pin that tag to the upper right top of our pillow. And our cute 5x8 little pillow is complete. Let's take a look at the comparison photo. So their 3.5 by 5 pillow actually came in a set of 3 at $34. If you divided that out, one would come to $11.33 or so. Let's just say $11. Our price, had we made a set of 3, would be at $4.50. Dividing that out would be $1.50 for each pillow, for out-of-pocket savings for a set of 3 at $29.50. What do you think? Let's head into our 2-part project, number 5. So what I'm doing, just making my own pattern, folding a piece of copy paper in half, and kind of figuring out what height I want. And I'm going to go about 7 inches in height. So of course I'm going to cut off that extra. What I want to do is make like a top of a hat. And so I'm just going to use my paper cutter and kind of slant a cut on the right side. And then I'll fold that in half, that paper, so I can, get the exact same cut on the other side and cut that off. Perfect, and then I've got a hat here, obviously, so no free pattern for you. I just explained how to do it. Now I want to figure out the brim of my hat, and I'm thinking I want to go about a couple inches out from the width of the hat there, which you can see is 3 3/4. I'll freeze it in a little bit so you can see the width of everything I've done, the measurements, in case you want to do the exact same. And I'm using my little school compass thingy here, and I'm going to try that circle first. It's too big, and so the third time in, I finally got my circle size I wanted. I just kept going over till, try number 3, and I got it correct. And then, of course, once I get that size and I'm happy with it, I'm going to cut that pattern out. All right, so here's my measurements. The diameter of the hat is about 7 inches. The hat itself is about 7 inches tall, 3 3/4 inches at the bottom, and 5.5 inches at the top. For the fabric of the hat, on the brim, I'm going to use this striped fabric from Walmart. I'm going to cut 2 of those. And on the hat itself, I have this machine quilted bedding I picked up at Amazon for like $30 for a king size. I'm going to cut 2 of those. So here's that cut out on the hat. I'm not cutting out extra batting for that. It's got plenty for what I need in the hat, but I did cut out 2 circles of batting for the brim itself. That's optional if you want to cut that out, but I thought it would kind of, fit in with the quiltedness of the top. So if you're a gluer and you cut out batting, you can glue those together and then set it aside. And then on the hat, you could go around and glue around the outer perimeter and just leave that bottom portion open for stuffing. I, of course, am going to take my hat to the sewing machine, and just like the gluers, I'm going to sew around 3 sides, leaving that bottom edge open for stuffing. I just think this turns out so super cute. I love the whole ensemble when it's done. I can't wait for you to see it all. All right, once that's done, you're going to stuff your hat. Nice and easy, right? Stuff it as full as you want it. I go pretty tight and I go pretty full. I'm just that way whenever I stuff anything, pillows or anything like that. So, you do you and your stuffing. All right, now once we get that stuffed, we're going to work on our hat brim again. I'm folding just one piece in quarters so I can find my center. All right, I'm going to mark it with the Sharpie marker so my eyes can see it, and then set that aside for a minute. I'm going to cut a couple of slits in the bottom of the hat. And then back to the brim of the hat, I'm going to use this, I think it's about a 2-inch diameter circle. I'm just going to draw a circle from that point that I marked because I want to cut that out on one part of the brim only. You can see the other one's laying, in the upper left corner. Don't cut that one, just one half of the brim only. All right, and then we're going to take our hat and stuff it through the brim. And I'm stuffing it through the brim so it's about 1 inch into that brim, I guess you could say, and then using my Beacon Fabri-Tac glue and gluing each of the sections down. And I don't want to sit and hold the glue. Glue takes about a minute to set up, so I'm just going to pin each section down. And don't worry, those pins will come out pretty easy after the glue is set. All right, so get my pins in, I let it set, and in comes Bella to join us as we take our pins out. You'll see how easy the pins come out. I do get a lot of questions from you guys, what kind of breed that Bella is. She is a ragdoll, and it's a Torty Lynx ragdoll, a little bit of a mix in there. So super pretty, super soft fur. All right, once that's done, you're going to add glue. Those of you gluers, you can see how much I'm adding, and you're going to glue your 2 brim pieces together. I'm leaving about 1 inch around the perimeter so that I could sew around that to add that detailing in so it matches the top of the hat. And make sure, I go in later, make sure, number 1, you match your stripes if you do a stripe. And I do go in later and I glue that batting down a little bit better because you want to make sure that, you don't have your pieces open. Make sure all your batting and your fabric pieces are all glued together really well. Again, I'm gluing, oh my gosh, I am sewing around the perimeter here. And then I'm going to go in and sew right up close around the perimeter of the hat area as well, just in case any of that shows. It doesn't really, my next step, we put a strip around the bottom of the hat, and I do kind of fold it down onto the hat a little bit so it does cover that up, but I thought just in case, it'll look finished and complete there. All right, here's what that looks like. See the inner circle, and then of course that outer circle, if you're sewers. So our next, this is some fabric, again, I got at Walmart. I'm going to kind of measure how big I need it, overlapping it a little bit. And then, of course, if you're a gluer, I'm going to rip that edge off. And then if you're a gluer, you can go ahead and glue that on. I'm going to sew around it to add detailing so it goes in with the rest of my hat. And this is what that looks like. I did just a double sewing. I wasn't trying to be neat about it. In fact, I will sew crooked on purpose just to make it fun. And then I'm going to go ahead and get that glued on. Again, that bottom edge of the strip, I'm kind of laying onto the brim of the hat a little bit to cover up that sewing. But like I said, if any of that showed, I'm okay. It'll look all right. All right, here's what we've got so far. Looking cute. I know it. Let's go on with a little more detail. Set that aside. So I've got 3 wood pieces here. I've got a dowel, of course. I've got a wood star. These come with craftingwithkimber.com, and a little spool. I'll have the link down below for that. And a little spool, 25 cents, found at a thrift store. To cut the dowel, I'm using dog nail clippers from Dollar Tree. They work great. I know mine, it didn't seem to snap really good. It was because mine are getting dull. I need to get a new pair. I've had them a while. I'm taking Waverly Antique Wax mixed with water, and I'm just staining up our spool here. Now, this spool is actually, part B of this project here today. And then I'm taking Dixie Belle drop cloth, Dixie Belle paint in the color Drop Cloth, and just lightly painting up the dowel. I don't want it to look perfect, you know, I want it to look rustic, so just one quick little wash of it. And then of course I will come in and paint the star. I'll be using this same star in a larger size in our next project as well. So again, I will have that link listed down below for you along with the sizes I've used in my description box. And then once everything's dry, I'm just going to kind of distress up the star here. And then I will come in and distress up our spool. Oh, this project's going to be so cute. I can't wait till you see it all together. Once this is done, we're going to go into making a little flag for our hat. And so this is just some ripped muslin material. It's about 2.5 inches by 5. I'm going to fold it in half, and then I cut a little piece of batting here, go in with the quilted look the rest of the hat for the front, and then a little square piece of fabric I ripped for the front as well. If you're a gluer, you can just glue all of this together and then take this and glue it anywhere you want onto your dowel. And I say that because I'm going to put mine down just a little bit, as you see here. Now I'm going to take mine and sew around the outer perimeter of the big piece and then onto the little piece. So here's what that looks like. At the last minute, I decided to kind of, you know, I sewed everything with this strip open. And then at the last minute, I decided to sew kind of right next to the fold so I can just slide it onto the dowel. That's why my flag is kind of in 2 pieces, but that's okay because now the sewing of the back of where I sewed that colored piece on the front doesn't show on the very back of the flag as I'm gluing it together here, if that makes any sense. All right, so I slide it onto my dowel. Now I'm going to slide it down, add a little glue onto the dowel, and then slide my flag up. It's ready to go. I'm going to leave a little bit of dowel at the top showing, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue my painted star onto the front of that. Perfect, and I'm set that aside for a minute. Now I've got about a 1.5 inch ripped strip of muslin, and probably about 24 inches long. I'm just tying a bow. It's going to be longer than I need. I always want to have extra. I rather rip off, you know, extra material if I don't need it. And now I'm going to bring in some decorative Excelsior I get at Joann's. First off, though, I'm going to glue my flag kind of slanted to the right side onto my hat. All right, and we're using the Excelsior to kind of cover, that's what it looks like, to kind of cover down at the bottom so that you don't see that, you know, we've glued the dowel to the hat. Does that make sense? Just kind of cover that up, finish it off. And now I'm gluing my muslin made into a bow down at the bottom of that, so that covers it up even more. And then I am going to go ahead and kind of wrinkle and crinkle around the sides of the hat here and just kind of spot glue the tails of that bow into place. I've already ripped off any excess. It was too long. Got it to the tails to the length I need, and then I'm just kind of, like I said, wrinkling and crinkling it up and spot gluing it into place so it looks really cute. And then I've got a piece of crochet trim here from Dollar Tree. I just tied a little knot in the center. I'm going to glue that down into the middle of the bow as well. And then I've got a little rusty bell here I'm going to glue into the center of that. And I do add a little bit more Excelsior off camera, kind of in that area right underneath the bell there. I thought it needed just a little more Excelsior. All right, now we're going to take our spool here. I am going to add a cute little flag in there. You don't have to. The hole is there. Why not? So we're going to kind of do the same process we just did with the flag we made. But first, I've got a couple pieces of ripped muslin here, about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and it's in 2 pieces only because I had a scrap and I was ripping and using the scrap piece. But if you want, you can rip it into one long piece, probably about 24 inches long. And then of course you see me, I'm just gluing one piece onto here. And then before I glue the other piece on it, so it's about 12, 14 inches there, I have taken my clickable stamps I get from Michael's. I'll have the link down below for you. I've spelled out Sweet Land of Liberty. I'm using my VersaFine ink, and I'm just going to stamp on this piece of fabric about 4 times. I know that one didn't come out as dark, but wait, I'm going to be a little bit talented here in a minute. This will look like, you know, we've stamped it on the whole spool of ribbon, but we didn't really. So I took my stamp apart, and now look, I'm coming in. I'm like, I hope I can do it. I hope I can do it. And I did. It didn't stamp double, you know, so it looked like it was double image. Here comes the L. I'm so proud. There it is. Did it. Now I'm going to take this and glue the remainder of this onto the spool. And then I'm just going to kind of tip it down a little bit and spot glue it right there. So it looks like our ribbon is kind of hanging off our spool a little bit, right? Perfect. Just like that. And we'll set it aside. This is going to look so cute. I love it. Now we're going to make our flag. So I've got the remainder of the dowel that I used on the other flag, right? And then I've got some fabric again, cut, doing it just like we did the first one. A little rectangular piece, probably 2 by 5, and a little 2-inch square here with some batting underneath it. I've sewed around the edges, just like I did on the first one. This one, though, I didn't sew next to the fold. I left it open. And then I'm ripping another little piece. It's like a 1 by 1 inch square, and I'm using the clickable stamps again and Stamping USA, and I will sew that on there as well. Those of you that are gluers, you can just glue this whole ensemble together. And then I'm just taking my vintage photo ink and I'm inking this one versus the other one where we kind of painted it. And here's what my whole USA looks like together. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to glue my dowel at a slant because our hole in the spool, not slanted, so I want it to look like my flag is hanging out slanted, right? And then I'll go ahead, once that dowel's in my slanted position, I will glue our flag to itself. Because remember, we have front and back. Glue it to itself. And then I'm not going to glue this into the top of the spool because it fits tight enough. It's perfect. That makes this project complete. Let's end last year's favorite DIYs with project number 6. For this project, we're going to be making a fun patriotic floral bouquet. It should be pretty easy. But this pattern is nothing new under the sun. From my scrapbooking days, I've used dies to make rolled roses and things like that. So I just hand drew a pattern for you, but I made it jihugic to make some really nice big roses. So this is not my original idea. It's out there, okay? So there'll be a link to my blog in the description box to find your rose pattern. So what you'll do is you'll cut it out in the 2 long scallop pieces. You'll cut it out, tape it together at the dash line to form one big long scallop piece, okay? And then you've got your other 2 pieces for underneath your flower and your leaf. Now my fabrics here, the bottom one, the red plaid, is from Walmart. The middle 2 are Hobby Lobby. This is just the placemat I got at the thrift store. Again, I love the color of the green. And then I'm using some burlap from Dollar Tree. And this is just some like grain sack looking type of material I got off eBay. You can use any type of material you want, of course. And then this is just like 100% cotton fabric, almost like a duck cloth. I am going to use fusible interfacing. It's optional. You don't have to. I have extra firm and medium in my stash. I'm going to use the medium. I don't want it really extra firm because it'll make it too stiff. So you need 2 pieces of fabric per flower with that long scallop pattern. And I'm just going to lay all my fabrics down together at one, lining up the edge, and then actually 3 pieces of interfacing that I cut out. I just show one here, and then I'm going to pin that scallop to all of it and cut it all out at one time. Just makes it easy. All right. I'm doing the same thing on the leaf. I just kind of folded that placemat so that I could cut out multiple leaves and multiple pieces of interfacing at one time. But for each leaf, just like the main rose, you need 2 pieces of fabric, showing it here. And if you use interfacing, just 1 piece of interfacing. And then the little round scallopy piece that goes under the flower. Again, I'm just cutting it all together to cut multiples at once. And just like everything else, you need 2 pieces of that and 1 piece of interfacing for each flower. Okay? Let's move on if you're doing interfacing. And I believe I used all mine. If your Dollar Tree has interfacing, you can pick that up, very inexpensive. And interfacing has like a rough dotted side. That's the side you want to lay down against the wrong side of your fabric and just iron it down. Then once that's done, if you're a gluer, you're just going to glue your other piece of fabric right side up and glue it all together, okay? And if you don't use interfacing, just glue your 2 pieces together, wrong sides together. And if you're a sewer, you're just going to go and sew around the entire outer perimeter. All right, and now my little scallop piece that goes underneath our flower, I'm ironing down the dotted side to the fabric, wrong side of the fabric. Put your right side together and you're going to either glue it or sew it together. I'll show you what the sewing is going to look like on that in a minute. And then the same thing on your leaf. You're going to iron down the dotted side to the wrong side of your fabric and glue your leaf together or sew around the edges. All right, and again, I know I went really fast there, but I'll show you what it looks like for you sewers, how I sewed around that. And so here, of course, I am just sewing around the outer perimeter of that long scalloped piece. And again, as I said twice already, I think twice or once, I know it for sure, you don't need to use the interfacing. I just want it a little bit more stiffer, so it's a little bit more kind of easier to roll our rows, okay? So let me finish up this. Now I'm going down the straight edge here, and then I did the rest off camera. So here's my leaf. See, I sewed around the outer perimeter. You could add some stitching detail down the center as well. And then for the under the rows, this is how I sewed around that. Just basically the straight sides and around the outer edge. And then this is what the long scallop looks like. All right, so now I've got some dowels here. You could use sticks from the backyard, and I just stained them. I used my Waverly Antique Wax mixed with water, just did a quick little stain. Now for this next part, I advise you use needle and thread. You could just glue it, but it might get a little cumbersome, and then you might be cussing me out. So you're gonna start about 1 inch in with your needle and thread. We need that straight first inch to start our roll on our dowel. And you're going to poke your needle through your fabric from the front to the back, and you're just going to pleat that fabric onto your needle if you don't know how to do this. This is going to give us a nice stitch so we can wrinkle up and add gathers into our fabric. If you need to slow this down and really get instruction on it, in my blog post there'll be a link to a video where you can watch that video and slow it down for you. So this starts out probably 18 inches or so long, and by the time you're done with your gathering stitch, it ends up to be about 9 inches. So it's going to make your fabric like cut down in half, okay? And then once you're done, you're going to, tie that off and make a knot. So I'm gonna use hot glue here. You're gonna start with that first inch where we didn't sew, and you're going to round it really tight onto your dowel, okay? And then you're just gonna start adding some gluing right at the bottom where that raw edge where you stitched, and begin to loosely roll your fabric around the rest of it. And you could pleat it a little bit more as you're gluing, but allow the gathered of the stitches that we put in there to do the work for you. And make sure you're keeping that bottom edge as even as possible, okay? And as I'm gluing, I'm just really loosely, I am pinching it a little bit in some places, but you just, like I said, you want a nice loose rows when you're done, and then, finish up gluing that rest of that fabric there. Perfect. We've got a little rose. I'm kind of turning it out a little bit. I believe I just kind of glue that last little bit outwards so it gives it a nice roll to the outer edge. All right. And then we're going to take our little round scallop piece, and just probably be easier to watch. But as you see, I added some glue to the straight edge and part on that inner circle. I'm going to push it up toward the rose and then glue that straight edge down a little bit more. Add a little bit more glue toward that smaller circle in the center, and I'm going to pull that around the bottom edge of that rose, okay? And that's going to help cover up that raw edge. Add a little bit more glue, and I'm going to fold it over the other end that we started with, and this is how it looks, and it ties everything off, okay? And then I'm going to add a little bit of glue in my leaf here just to give it a little personality. Add some glue at the straight edge of the leaf, and then you can put that leaf wherever you want. And you could do 2 leaves if you want. I just wanted 1, and then I just kind of bend it outwards, and that rose is done. Here's number 2, and here's number 3. Really cute. Now for this next part, I want to make a little bag to put this in, but you could put it in a vase or a cute little design box, however you want to do it. And I'm going to start with 2 pieces of burlap and then 2 pieces of fabric that I want to use. Now the burlap's about 6 by 9 roughly. It might be a little bit over that. Whereas what we're going to do is, we're going to sew down 3 sides, leaving the top edge open. But this burlap is a pretty loose weave, so I would suggest going over that sewing. I went over it about 3 or 4 times, or it's just going to come right out, trust me. If you're a gluer, you're going to glue around 3 sides in between the 2 fabrics, leaving the top open. Now for our next fabric, this is like lining of our burlap bag. So you're going to get about a 3-inch opening. I like to tie it or pin it off with pins. You don't want to glue or sew in this area, okay? You want to leave your top edge open and glue or sew around that edge. I'm going to mark it here so I know not to glue or sew there, and then glue or sew up above it. Okay, I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. So here I am sewing around my burlap bag, of course. And like I said, I go around it. I tested it first, and I went sewed around once. And then when I turned it like right side out, the bag came completely open. So if you're a sewer, I'd go over that same sewing line at least 3 times. Now we're onto our fabric. So here I am sewing down the long line. And if you're a gluer, where I sew, you glue, all right? Now I'm coming across the bottom. I'm sewing down across that bottom. I'm coming up to my first pin here. I'm going to sew up to that pin. I'm just going to take it out of my machine and pop it back in above that second pin and continue sewing up to the top of the bag. All right? So when it's done, we have our opening of our bag and we have our little side opening here. So now we're going to go with the burlap. We want it to stand up. So we're going to, in the corner, we're going to pull it out from the corner. So we have like a little triangle, okay? We're going to take both sides of the bag, pull it out from the corner so we have a little triangle, and sewers are going to sew across that. I'm going to put a pin in there. So we go to the other side, pull it out from the corner, make a little triangle, all right? And I'm going to put a pin in it. Now, if you're a gluer, I'm going to show you how to do one side here, and it's about 1 inch down. I would put a pin in it, and then go about 1/4 inch from the top of your pin and cut that off. This is for gluers, okay? Have finger protectors on, please, and you're going to glue above that pin between the fabric and pinch it together, okay? And you're going to do this on both sides, all right? This is what it looks like. I've now sewed mine. I sewed it off camera, so I'm going to trim it up here. That's gluers, sewers, you know, to sew across it because I said to do that. Here's my other one. I sewed across it. I'm going to cut off the excess. We're going to do the same thing on the fabric bag. You're going to pull it out from the corner about 1 inch down and pin it. Other side, pull it out from the corners, inch down and pin it. If you're a gluer, cut that off about 1/4 inch up. Put your finger protectors on. If you're using hot glue, take your hot glue in between your fabric here, right up above that pin like I said, and smush it together. If you're a sewer, you're going to sew both of those. I'm going to do that off camera. Gluers, you're going to do this on both sides, both the same, okay? Here mine is, I've got it sewn, so I'm going to cut that other end off. And now you're going to take your burlap bag and you're going to turn it right side out and get all your edges out. Okay, now it's going to stand up. And you're going to take your fabric and you're going to put the burlap bag inside of your fabric. And your fabric is wrong side out, as you see here. The pretty side's in toward the burlap bag, and we've got our side slit opening there. All right, make sure everything is even at the top. And what we're going to do, sewers are going to sew right along the top there, about 1/4 inch seam allowance. Gluers are going to glue the two together at the top, all the way across, all the way around. All right? Glue that whole thing together. And here I am, of course, sewing it together again, about 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. Again, if you don't want to do this, a cute little box from Dollar Tree that you can paint or cover in paper or just throw them in a vase or even in like a dough bowl or just throw the roses on tiered tray, whatever you would like to do. So here it is all sewn at the top. We've got our opening. So through that opening, you're going to turn it right side out and pull your burlap bag through it. Okay, and then this is what it looks like, of course. And then you're going to sew or glue that opening closed. I'll go ahead and sew it off camera so it's all, you know, nice and closed up, of course. All right? That's where I'm going to sew. Bella's come to join us for just a minute. There I am all sewn up. And then now what you can do is just tuck that fabric down inside your burlap bag. All right? Just like that. And then those of you that don't want to sew, you can just go ahead and turn down the top edge, give you a couple of inches there so that you see that pretty lining we just put in there. I want to add a little bit more detailing. This is optional, so I am making my edges at the top. Those of you who sew, I'm pinning them all together at the top, and I'm going to do a little 1/4 inch seam allowance there and sew all the way around that top edge before, here it's done, before I flip it down. It just gives it a little decorative finished edge. That's all it is. You can do or not do that. All right, and if you want to, you can glue that down. I don't, I just leave it there. Now I'm taking just some gel foam I got from Dollar Tree, those ones that come like 4 pieces to a pack. I'm just doing 2. I've put it inside my bag here. I glued the 2 pieces of gel foam together so it stays stable. And now I'm using a piece of that grain sack-like material for this part, for this tag. And I cut it, it's probably about a 3x6. I will have a free printable link to my blog. I've printed it out onto some fabric. There'll be a link in my blog post as well to show you how to print onto fabric using laser or inkjet printer. So I'm not going to show you that process. And what I'm going to do to start out with is my long piece of fabric. I'm just kind of pulling on the edges to defray it. I'm going to turn it down about 1 inch and then add that little 1776 at the bottom of the tag. Okay, nice and easy. I'm going to go ahead and distress the edges around this piece as well, so it looks like the tag we distress. I'm going to use my my Distress Oxide ink in Walnut and kind of ink around the edges. It gives it a nice little halo around our design there. And I'm going to do the same thing on the main fabric of the tag. And then if you're a gluer, you're just going to glue it all together, and you can fold down that top edge and glue it down. I'm going to sew it all together, right? So around this, so around the tag, and then kind of at the top here. All right? You can see to the left there, I've got it sewn at the top already, ready to go. And now I'm just going to sew that tag on a little bit here. And yes, like I said, there's a link to this printable on my blog, and then the link to how to print onto fabric with your printer. Okay? Get that finished. We're almost done with this. I promise. It's just so cute. I love how it turns out. All right, and now what I've done, the tag is done. I've taken a 1-inch strip of fabric. I ripped it and tied it into a bow, so I'm just going to glue it on at the top of our tag. And now I'm taking some big twine, large diameter twine I got at Walmart, and I'm just tying it under the folded edge of our bag. Don't worry, we are going to cover that gel foam up. And I'm just tying it in a big bow. And then I'm going to see how my tag's going to lay on here to figure out how long I want to leave my tails on that twine bow, and then just go ahead and cut those off, leaving a little bit more room because I will add a bead. And now I'm using these are dog nail clippers you can get from Dollar Tree to cut off my stems, my dowel stems of my roses to get them to the length I want. And I'm going to use some Excelsior. We're going to use that to cover our gel foam. So now I'm just going to put my 3 roses in how I want into our little bag. And then I'm going to take the gel foam, oh my gosh, I'm going to take the Excelsior here and cover the gel foam as much as you want. Just cover that all up. Super, super cute. Perfect. And then I'm going to safety pin our little tag to the center of that twine bow. And then I'm just going to fluff up the center of my bow a little bit. And then I'm going to add some large beads to the ends of my twine tails there. And just, tie a little knot, of course, underneath that bead so the bead doesn't fall off. That makes this project complete. You made it through the rerun season. Now it's time for a couple of new projects. So let's get started with project number 1. For this project, we're going to be making a cute flag. So you're going to need some fabrics. I have a vintage spindle. You could use any kind of base you want and some batting. And then I got these kindling pieces. They're like a starter kit you can get at Walmart. I thought they'd be great to use because they're so rustic looking, but you can just go out into the backyard. Now, I did check before I bought them. I looked on the bag, and I even asked a Walmart associate, and he looked up online. There's no chemicals or anything whatsoever on these sticks, but I love how rustic they are, so I bought them so I don't have to go searching in the backyard. This is the spool I'm using. Now, one side has this, which is perfect to fit a stick in, and it's nice and stable. So there you go. You could probably, cut these down smaller if you wanted, or if you wanted them longer, you could put them together and just wood glue them together, and then tie them together with twine. So, if it sticks out, you don't see the seams, something like that. All right, so these fabrics, I couldn't tell you where I got them. You're going to need 2. They're about 8 inches in length by 6 inches in height. Now you can make this however big or small that you want it. Now these next pieces are for the star area, of course. This is the base. It's about a 4 by 4 piece of fabric, and all my fabrics, I just ripped them. I didn't cut them because I want them to look distressed. And then this one, of course, is about 3 by 3.5. I wanted it to be, you know, not quite square. And then I'm cutting some crochet trim. Got this from Dollar Tree. You can use fabric strips, and I am cutting them bigger so that I can crinkle them up when I add them, but you can make them the exact width if you want, if you don't want them to look crinkled, if you know what I mean. And now I'm going to cut some batting here. I'm only going to cut about 2 inches left. I don't want any batting on this left side, so I want 2 inches less than the flag itself. I'll show you here what it looks like. So this will go here, and then whatever you use for a holder will go here. So you don't want the batting on that side necessarily. And the batting is just so that the flag is stiff. So when it hangs upright, it'll hang sideways stiffly. First thing I'm going to do, if you're a gluer, you can glue your stripes on, and then you can glue your pieces for your star on. And then you can add a star in the center if you want. All right. You can add like a wood star. I think I got those at Walmart that have the holes in them. These I got off of Dollar Tree signs. I pulled the metal stars off of them. I'm going to use some of this. It's a really vintage kind of crochet tablecloth. And I know they're flowers, but this is supposed to be kind of a little off, and it's by no means any disrespect to the American flag because I was raised in a military family, but I just wanted to be a little bit of fun and vintage, but still like our colors, and you know it's a USA flag. I will also add a metal rusty star to the front of that, so we do get our star emblem in that area. So back to the gluers. If you pick a star for that, you can go ahead and glue that on, and then you're sitting here waiting because us sewers are going to sew on our stripes and stuff onto the first layer of fabric only. Make sure you don't have your 2 pieces of flag together. You don't want to sew through your flag. So here I am, as you can see, just sewing through it, just one line through the middle. I'm gathering it up. I'm crunching it up because I want it to be that way. Again, you can just make your stripes, whatever you choose to use, ripped fabric or lace or whatever, and you can make them the exact length without any gathers on your flag. Okay, now I'm coming in and I'm sewing the bottom layer of our star area. This is what that looks like. And then of course I'm going to come in with the blue fabric, and I'm laying everything in the star area kind of wonky and fun, giving it that vintage kind of Americana, rustic, farmhouse, whatever descriptive words we can think of to, you know, make this flag really neat for our display, of course. And then I'm just sewing a little bit through the center like this. I could have just done one line or even just glued it with my Fabri-Tac glue, but you know, I'll cover it with the stars, so that's okay. Now I'm taking this Distress Oxide ink in Vintage Photo, and I'm just adding a little bit of distress color to it. All right, and then I'm going to, if you're a gluer, now you're back with this again and you use batting, you can glue your batting on, but remember to leave about 2 inches to the left side, and then you can kind of glue that portion together. Now, if you're a gluer, what you'll do is you'll glue alongside the edge of that batting, okay? You'll leave the center open, and then you'll glue alongside the edge of your 2 pieces of fabric. You want to leave that space to slide whatever you're using for your, you know, flag holder through that center. Now I'm going to sew mine a little bit different, and I thought I'd do this for maybe a little bit stability. I'm going to start at that edge of that batting, come around, and then end up at the bottom portion of the flag, and then sew the left side. I'll show you what it looks like once we pull this out. But I'm doing that because I thought it might give me a little bit more like concrete definition of where that flag holder is going to be and give it a little bit more stiffness against that batting. Okay, so I hope that's understandable. And if you want to sew it differently, you're a little bit more experienced than I am, you know, you do you and sew it how you want to sew it. But that's why I did this. So here it is. So see the edge where I sewed, and then here's about a little 2-inch strip where I came around and sewed and stopped at the edge of that batting. Like I said, I thought that would give me more stability. I didn't sew through there because then I would sew right through my design. Okay, so that's why I did that, but you don't have to. You could leave that spot open. And then, of course, this will go right through, and like I said, thought it'd give me that little bit of stiffness for the holder to go through that. Now, I'm not going to glue my holder into my base because it is vintage. I will glue my star down here because I want to add that, but you don't have to add a star if you don't want to. All right, so it holds nice and stable in this, but I'm going to leave it because it's vintage. But I do want to glue my stick into the flag so that it doesn't move. I mean, I pretty much have just enough space for the stick, but still I don't want it to, wobble back and forth in that area. And then I'll just shove it right in there. And then I'm going to add a little bit of thick twine here. I'm going to wrap it quite a little bit a ways around our little stick area there, just to kind of cover that up a little bit and give it something. And then I was going to leave it like that. I walked by it for about 2 or 3 days inside. I'm going to add a little something at the bottom. Okay. Let me trim this off. Here we go. So I decided I'd take some red and blue plaid fabric and wrap it around. I didn't glue to the spindle. I'm gluing the fabric to itself, and then I want to make a little tag here. So I'm ripping some fabric here, probably about a 2 by 2.5 inch piece of fabric, using Michael's Clickable Stamps VersaFine ink, and I'm going to stamp USA on there. I'll have the clickable stamps in the description box with the ink if you want to do that. And then I'm using a little piece of thin batting you can get in a bag at Walmart. I'll sew around that off camera. And then I'm going to take Distress Oxide ink in the Vintage Photo and ink around a little bit so it matches our flag. A little safety pin. I'm going to pin it to the fabric wrapped around the base. I like it better, and that makes this project complete. Here we go with project number 2. For this project, we're going to be making a pillow. I like them, so we're going to use this crochet trim from Dollar Tree, some of this like twill looking tape from Hobby Lobby. I got it half price, but you can use whatever you want if you choose to use that. This fabric, I don't know where, but some kind of blue fabric for the star area. I've got these 3 red plaid fabrics. I think I picked them up at Walmart. This is for the stripe area, of course. This is going to be for a little tag we're going to make on top. I picked this up at Hobby Lobby as well. Our cute, distressed kind of vintage tablecloth we're going to rip up. I'm going to do a nice big area out of it for the star area. All right, and then I forgot to show you, this is a vintage tablecloth I picked up at a thrift show, and I've been kind of just ripping it for that. Now, also I picked up, these are vintage dinner napkins, and you don't have to use it all. I'm just doing it, and it's about 10 inches tall by 16.5 or so inches wide if you want to use like a secondary fabric here. I just wanted to use these. I thought it would lend to the vintage look of it. And then this is a quilted like bedding that I pick up off eBay or Wayfair or something like that. This is running about 12 inches tall by about 16.25 inches long. You can use whatever fabric you like. I use this because it's quilted, it's machine done. I don't have to, feel bad about cutting it up. This is for the star area. It's about a 4.5 by 4.5 inch piece. All right. And then for the stripe area, I've got one shorter and a couple of, same size length ones. They're all about 2.25 inches tall. Again, these fabrics on top are all ripped, so it gives it our distressed look. And then this is about 14.5 inches in length, and the shorter one is about 11.5 inches in length. You can do them whatever length and stuff you want. All right, now I could leave this here because it does have the white from the vintage napkin underneath for stripes, but I kind of want to add some stripes. And if you don't want the vintage napkin, you want to just lay right on top, let me show you how it looks. Looks perfectly wonderful. You don't need that. It's just like, I paid for them, I want to use them. But like I said, I could use the white of this napkin down below, or the whiteness of your material if you use a white kind of background material for your pillow. But I went ahead and cut some pieces the same width and length of my, you know, like short piece of fabric. And then my longer piece of fabric, it's a little shorter, but I'm okay with that because I'm going to use some of that twill ribbon and that crochet ribbon. Here's the twill ribbon. Again, I cut it longer than necessary because I want to gather it, but you don't have to. And you don't even need to add anything on top, all right, of your stripes. You could totally leave this part out. I'm going to cut a little bit off this one, and I'm going to come to the right side with it, and then that crochet ribbon is going to, at the bottom, that second stripe is going to come to the left a little bit. We've got the blue of our star area on the bottom. Now we're bringing in our vintage tablecloth, and then I'm just going to have some batting here. I'm going to do like 2 pieces and then a piece of fabric over the top. We're going to do a little quote right in that star area, okay? Now, if you're a gluer, you can just glue all of your pieces down however you choose to do this onto your top layer of your pillow fabric, of course. If we're a sewer, we got to kind of go in steps. We got to start from the, you know, the most bottom layer, and then start with our stripes, the most bottom stripe, since I'm layering each kind of stripe over the top of each, and then work our way up till we get to that top layer, and then I'll add my ribbons, all right, and then I'll add my star area, okay? I'll probably just glue that tablecloth part down, and let's make our tag. I'm using the clickable stamps again. Again, a link will be down below in the description box. Sweet Land of Liberty into my VersaFine ink. I'm going to stamp onto my piece of fabric here. All right, and now set that aside because I will sew it together, you know, with the batting underneath. Let me sew my vintage napkin on top first. Again, I'm using these because I bought them. They were cool. Why buy them and let them sit there? I bought them for crafting, and I don't want to cut them up. I want them to be whole, and I will make it so when I lay the stripes on it, see like the stripe here I'm doing, you can see a little bit of that embroidery on the napkin. I want that there. Again, I'm using it to give us a more of that vintage feel. And I'm just kind of like, I sew the plaid fabric on and the stripe right over the top, and you know, just sew them on how you want. I'm kind of going around each layer, of course. You could just sew right down the middle if you want them to really look kind of, you know, up and rustic, but I'm just sewing down each one. I kind of sew down, I guess I should say, 3 sides of fabric, of the strip of fabric, and then I lay the next one on top, and that's going to sew the top fabric plus the 4th side of the strip below it. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I'm doing here, and just kind of, you know, going through it for you. I do like how this turned out, but I just have this feeling in my brain, it's not going to be for everybody, but this is just to give you inspiration. Do it how you want to do it. And this pillow is kind of small, you know. I will be making a few different designs for, you know, our July 4th season here because I've just got some great ideas. So you're going to see a few pillows pop up. I love making pillows. If you don't like, fast forward. Here I am pinning down like my little gathers. And some of them look, they're nice flat gathers, you know, folded gathers, and some of them are really wrinkly and almost distorted looking gathers. And I am going around these on all sides as well. Unlike on our little mini flag, you know, I just kind of sewed through the center because that was such a small area. All right, and then getting the crocheted trim here, and you can use all the, like, if you want crochet, all crochet. You don't even have to have the white stripe fabric underneath. You can just use, you know, trim for your white stripe. You don't have to layer it like I did with the white tablecloth underneath and then the crochet on top of that. You could just do the crochet or just the ribbon, however you would like. Here I am sewing the blue star on, and then now I'm sewing this part on. Then we'll sew our little quote on top. Now you could put that quote anywhere on your little pillow you want and just add, you know, a fabric star or something to the center as usual. But I thought it'd be fun to just, you know, put the tag there. I thought it would give it a little something different. Okay, get that finished up. Perfect. Now we're going to put our 2 pieces front and back of pillow fabric together. If you're a gluer, you're going to come up 3 3/4 sides between the 2 fabrics at the end all the way around, and then just leave about a hand width opening for stuffing. If you're a sewer, you're going to sew around it. I did that off camera. Here it is. Now it looks really cute, but normally when I make pillows, they look cute, but they don't look really cute until you stuff them. Then like the personality comes out because it pops all your design out and everything like that. So stuff your pillow as full as you want it. And if you're a gluer, you'll glue it closed. A sewer, you'll sew it closed. And here it is, all done with some kitty tails in view. If you're new to my channel, I don't have professional video. I am just a crafter in normal everyday life, and I always have kitty bums or something, or, one of Bella or Boston, like laying in my 6 foot of space because there's a window right in front of me. Let me move my camera. I just thought I'd show you because people are like, why is there always cat bums in her video? This is why. I have Bella on the left, Boston on the right, and I barely just opened the video. Don't worry, or the window. Don't worry, I open it more later because I feel sorry. They're trying to look at a 2-inch opening, but they love it there because the window's there, and that's why my 6-foot table always becomes this little 2 feet of space. And that's why there's always cat bums and all 100% cats in my video. Now, to finish up the pillow, if you'd like, you can distress your fabric even more if the ripped fabric isn't quite enough for you. I'm taking 80 grit sandpaper because that's what's in my sander, and I'm just sanding along the cut edges of all the fabric because it quickly frays and distresses those edges to just add a little bit more, and that makes this project complete. So I hope you enjoyed this video, taking a look back at 6 of my favorite July 4th craft projects from last year, and then of course doing 2 new July 4th projects for this year. Leave me a comment down below and let me know which project from last year that we looked at today that you did not get to that you would love to do today. Did any of that make sense? And leave me a comment down below and let me know which of the 2 new projects was your favorite. Please give this video a thumbs up. Share it. It really helps my channel to grow. And if you walked in here for the first time, you're just checking things out, you're digging what you saw, make sure before you click off, you hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss out on another video from me. Now, before I go, I'm going to leave you with one final thought. Are we too busy with our everyday checklist that we aren't taking time to stop and seek God for our lives? Sometimes life gets so busy because of jobs, children, and other activities, but being busy isn't a bad thing. But if our head hits the pillow without a thought of what God had to offer us this day, then maybe something needs to change. Maybe our focus toward God needs an adjustment. Now, it's not to say that we are doing it on purpose. That's not it at all. In fact, we love Jesus. We are his children. We know him as our Lord and Savior, but we get so caught up in this task and that task that we don't stop to acknowledge or even thank Jesus for the promises he has given us. Now, I don't think he's reminding us of this to make us feel guilty about it. I think that he simply wants to acknowledge that we recognize what is happening and we need to change a few things in our life so that we spend quality time with him each day. When we allow ourselves to get too busy, we don't take the time to slow down and remember the relationship that we have with God. We need to realize he is with us in all things, and we need to keep pressing on in our daily life to acknowledge that he can help us get these things done. He cares about the mundane tasks that lie ahead. He wants to hear about our failures and victories. He wants to hear about our joys and disappointments. We need to remember that he created our days before any of them even came into existence. In the Bible, the book of Psalms, chapter 139 and 16, it says, "You saw who you created me to be before I became me. Before I'd even seen the light of day, the number of days you planned for me were already recorded in your book." Also, it doesn't matter to God where we spend time with him or what time of day we spend time with him. In the book of Psalms again, chapter 46, verse 10, it says, "Be still and know that I am God." It just matters to him that we spend the time we have and that we spend that time giving him the glory he deserves. In the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 36, "For from him and through him and for him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen." When we put God first in our schedules and make time for him, we will find that we actually look forward to that time with him. And when we put him first, every busy thing in our day will seem to fall into place. So don't be too busy for what really matters. Spend some time each day with Jesus. Actually, if it's been a while and time is available right now, give a little bit of it to God. Feel his peace. Feel His love. Feel His happiness and joy. Because in Psalms 118:24, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I thank you for sharing your time with me, and I'll talk with you again soon. Bye.